Well, again, Richard McCarthy, Norfolk Town Planner. I know some of you already and some I don't, and welcome. We have Howard Stein Hudson with us tonight. They're going to do the presentation, and then small enough group will just work as a group, right?
Yeah, that works. Maybe 2 groups.
Yeah, maybe 2 groups would be good. We're going to have a group discussion in groups, and then I'll segue to Casey. You can introduce yourself and your team, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. I'm Casey Oy. I'm a transportation, is this better? Transportation planner at Howard Stein Hudson, and I'm joined by Paul Nelson and Sarah Davis. And our consulting firm is helping the town develop the Complete Streets Prioritization Plan. So to give you an overview of what tonight's going to look like, first we'll talk about what the Complete Streets funding program is and why it's relevant to the town. Review some of our existing conditions findings that we've gathered over the last several weeks. Review some of the outstanding comments that we've received on the Wiki Map page. And then talk about what will be done next between now and the project's end date. And then the bulk of the evening is going to consist of everyone breaking out into groups and talking about project ideas and areas of opportunities that we can consider when we start drafting the project list for the prioritization plan. So what's a complete street? A complete street is a street that provides safe, accessible, and efficient options for all road users, including pedestrians, cyclists, transit users, and drivers. Improvements can vary in scale. So the 2 images that you see on the screen are examples of various scales of complete streets improvements. Complete streets improvements can include low-scale projects like crosswalks that you see in town center. It can include large-scale projects like a shared use path. And a shared use path is a off-road facility that accommodates pedestrians and cyclists at the same time. I think most importantly, Complete Streets is sensitive to community context and community needs. So a Complete Streets project of a protected bicycle lane in Boston might be successful and effective there, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for the town here. And that's fine because Norfolk road users are going to have different needs and different preferences. So Mass DOT is committed to promoting complete streets because of various benefits. It has safety benefits through several infrastructure improvements. You can really help reduce crashes. It has accessibility benefits. One of the underlying goals of Complete Streets is that it provides safe and accessible options for all users of different physical abilities. There are equity benefits. So Complete Streets encourages multimodal access and connectivity that allows people who don't own vehicles to be able to get around town. And because Complete Streets encourages multimodal access and connectivity, it also, that aspect of Complete Streets encourages people to be active and be able to walk and bike to destinations around town. It has economic benefits. So when you connect residential neighborhoods to retail destinations with a well-connected pedestrian bicycle network, you help capture residents who don't own vehicles to be able to get to those retail destinations by walking and biking. And all of these benefits are intended to have a positive impact of all residents of all ages and physical abilities. So here are just some specific numbers on the safety benefits of Complete Streets. When you install sidewalks or have shoulders, you tend to reduce pedestrian crashes by 71 to 88%. When you install medians or countdown signals or road diets, you help to reduce crashes between 8 to 49%. Approximately 18% of Americans will have some type of disability that will limit mobility. So when you install Complete Streets improvements such as curb cuts or crosswalks and curb ramps, you help a significant number of those people get around town and feel like they're a part of the community and are benefiting from infrastructure that the town is providing. So there are equity and health reasons for complete streets, because when you provide adequate bike, ped, and transit connectivity accommodations, you help families and children and people with disabilities and the elderly who don't necessarily own vehicles to allow them to get around town and access opportunities that they wouldn't necessarily have access to if they didn't have a vehicle. When you focus on implementing a transportation network that's comprehensive and inclusive, you help the local economy by allowing people, again, who don't own vehicles to get to local destinations and retail and commercial uses in the area. And in this way, this helps retail sales increase by up to 30%. You also see that land values will also appreciate by 70%. So to get into what the funding program is, the Complete Streets funding program is through the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, and it was released in February 2016, and it will continue to fund construction projects and technical assistance in the next several years through the Capital Investment Plan funds. And as of today, $30 million has been awarded towards construction funding throughout Massachusetts. So the funding program has 3 tiers or 3 steps. The first tier is the training, and this is where the town takes part in training that introduces the Complete Streets concept, as well as develop a Complete Streets policy. So once the town has completed the training and developed the policy and have gotten the necessary signatures from town government, they can submit this policy to Mass DOT for approval. And once the town's policy has been approved, then they can move on to tier 2, which is the prioritization plan development. And this is where the list of Complete Streets related projects are created by us, by the town, and by the public. Once the prioritization plan is completed, it is submitted to Mass DOT for approval again. And once that's approved, the town can then move on to tier 3, which is the construction funding phase. And this is where the town can apply for construction funding for projects that are in the prioritization plan that was approved by Mass DOT. And the town can be awarded up to $400,000 per submission. The program does allow towns to develop the policy and the prioritization plan at the same time. And they can do this through a letter of intent. Norfolk is one of the towns that is under a letter of intent. So they'll be submitting a policy early next year before the prioritization plan is submitted in April. So some numbers. So far, there are 10 municipalities, including Norfolk, that is under the letter of intent. There are 130 approved prioritization plans and 95 projects that have been awarded construction funding throughout Massachusetts. So in terms of funding, the program rewards municipalities up to $38,000 of technical assistance towards the prioritization plan that's reimbursable. The program also provides up to $400,000 of funding towards construction under tier 3 that's also reimbursable. And 2 important restrictions of the program are that it doesn't design any design efforts. So if a project in the plan requires any kind of design, that has to be funded through a different funding source. And the program does not fund any projects along state-owned roads. And in Norfolk, it's Route 1A and the roads surrounding the Massachusetts Correctional Institution.
So Route 115 didn't fall into that?
No, so it is Massachusetts state route, but it is managed by the town.
Oh, got it. Oh, I didn't know that.
So again, Norfolk is in the tier 1 and tier 2 phase, but tonight we're going to focus on getting your feedback and your project ideas that we can incorporate into the prioritization plan. So our firm so far has looked through all of the existing conditions that we received from the town. We've also done our own data collection to help us figure out areas of concerns and areas of potential demand. And a part of what we want to do tonight is share those results with you and get your feedback so that we can revise, if required, our analysis so that it reflects the town's true conditions. So we look at crashes using Mass DOT's crash data portal, and we specifically look at pedestrian bicycle crashes to help us evaluate and figure out where areas of unsafe design are located within the town. And between 2012 and 2016, there have been 3 non-fatal pedestrian crashes, all of them located along Main Street and 1 at the intersection of Pine and Everett. There were 2 non-fatal bicycle crashes between 2012 and 2016, 1 along Main Street and 1 at the intersection of North and Union. So we mapped out all of the destination points to help us create our lane demand map, which I'll talk about next. But the destination points that we looked at were churches, civic services, health services, parks and open space, restaurants, commercial uses, senior destinations, and transit stops and schools. So we look at pedestrian lane demand, and we look at this to evaluate where residents can potentially go to for retail. We look at lane demand because we want to see areas where there are clusters of various uses that residents can have access to. And we look at it to evaluate potential roadways that we can focus on so that it can provide a comprehensive network for people to get from their residential neighborhoods to retail destinations. And our findings show that within the town of Norfolk, most of the retail destinations and civic services and various destinations are all clustered within town centers shown along the red segments. And again, town center showed to have the highest number of destination points within the town. Within town center, you can access Town Hall, the Federated Church of Norfolk, various commercial uses, and a relatively good sidewalk pedestrian network. So in addition to pedestrian lane demand, we look at the pedestrian network. When we do this, we look for where sidewalks exist and then evaluate the conditions of the sidewalks in relation to the pedestrian experience. So when we evaluate the condition of the existing sidewalks, we like to look at the quality of the pavement, whether it's separated from the roadway, if there are any barriers on the sidewalk that would potentially inhibit anyone with a wheelchair to pass through. And for Norfolk, the town has relatively very good sidewalks. Route 115 south of Main Street showed to have fair to poor sidewalks, I think partially because some are in disrepair and are relatively narrow. So here are 4 images of examples of roadway characteristics that we've seen in the town. So Seacong Street is an example of a roadway in Norfolk where it's too narrow to implement any pedestrian, any sidewalks, or any infrastructure. And Rockwood Road is an example of a roadway in the town where you'll see sidewalks on one side and none on the other. King Philip Middle School has sidewalks and crosswalks, but it could be improved by adding curb ramps to allow people to be able to differentiate once they're differentiate from the sidewalk to when they're in the roadway. And town center, where it relatively has a very good sidewalk network. So similar to the pedestrian lane demand, we look at the bicycle lane demand. And this is, for the bicycle lane demand, we use a 1 mile buffer because theoretically cyclists have more land to cover on a bike. And our results show that the cluster of destination points that a cyclist could cover expands outside of the town center and really expands to Route 115, Medway Branch, and Union Street. Yeah. So we also looked at the bicycle level of comfort, and the criteria that we use to evaluate the level of comfort for a cyclist are roadway classifications. So whether it's a local road or a major route, the speed limits, the average daily traffic, and intersection characteristics. And overall, a lot of the residential local roads show to have high to medium comfort. Rockwood Road, Route 115 and Main Street did show to have relatively low comfort for cyclists, possibly because of relatively high speeds, the average daily traffic, or the lack of bicycle facilities that would accommodate cyclists riding through the area. So to be in line with the program's guiding principles, we look at equity. And for this evaluation, we use a census tract level to look at where the percentage of disabilities are allocated throughout the town. And overall, the highest percentage of disabled communities are in the southeastern portion of the town. Hillcrest Village is located along Rockwood Road, which would probably contribute to the second highest percentage of disabled populations in the northwest portion of the town. So what is often most forgotten are the transit connections and the transit improvements that could come with that we can also evaluate with Complete Streets. Through the Complete Streets funding program, you can include improvement projects such as benches, bus shelters, and crosswalks that connect to transit stops. And so this is a good opportunity to consider that for Norfolk because you have the MBTA commuter rail station and the Tri-Town connector through the Greater Attleboro Taunton Regional Authority. And so for the Tri-Town connector that's heavily used in the town, it does access destination points that I'm sure a lot of residents would like to have access to, such as the Council of Aging and the transit station, and I believe it also stops at MCI. But overall, in terms of ridership, for 2018, the Tri-Town connector does show a growing ridership trend. It did drop in April, but it has increased since then. And then looking at it for the last 3 years, ridership did consistently stay above 3,000, implying that there is a consistent number of people taking or using that service to get around town or to adjacent neighborhoods that are serviced by the Tri-Town connector. So that concludes our quantitative evaluation of the town. What we also like to do is gather community input, get qualitative data through our Wiki Map tool and the public meeting. So The Wiki Map Tool is an interactive web-based map where residents can access online and input any issues, any project ideas relating to complete streets on here. So if you haven't accessed it, if you want to provide input, you can go to the link here. I believe it's also accessible on the town website. It's going to be up for another month, so if you'd like to provide your input, please do so. This is one of our items or criteria that we highly consider when we do look at projects to add to the prioritization plan. So some of the outstanding comments that we saw on the Wiki Map includes high vehicular speeds along narrow roadways that provide unsafe conditions for other road users, such as pedestrians and cyclists. And some of the streets that were flagged as high vehicular corridors were Miller Street, Union, and Medway Branch, next to the Senior Center. Residents also noted intersections that were dangerous and also detracted residents from crossing the street because of the unsafe conditions. And two of the intersections that were flagged on the Wiki Map were North Street, Needham, and Pond, as well as the intersection of Rockwood and Boardman. There were a lot of comments.
One on Everett 115 was flagged by quite a few residents.
And that one too. Another popular comment that we saw was residents want to see more sidewalks, particularly along Main Street, to connect the area adjacent to Franklin, heading towards the town center. So tonight is the second method of getting community input, and that's the public meeting. And you guys are gonna be here to help us with that. So after tonight, we're gonna gather all of the information that you would provide us and then summarize it, and then we're gonna start figuring out a way to somehow incorporate that into our draft project list that we would work with Richard on. And then, and some of the key points that you should take away from this presentation, moving on to the breakout groups, is that projects in the prioritization plan are essentially the projects that the town will be able to choose from when they apply for Tier 3 funding. So if there are infrastructure improvements that you want to see in the town that it's not on the project list, it's unfortunately not going to be funded through this program. And so we want to make sure that this list of the prioritization plan will be the list of projects that reflects what the town wants, what is feasible, so that when Richard or when the town of Norfolk goes into the Tier 3 phase and applies for projects, they're projects that you want to see. And then again, projects that require design aren't going to be funded through this. Projects that need to be designed can be in the prioritization plan, but the design portion of it cannot be funded through this program. So again, state-owned roads are not funded through this program as well, and that's going to be Route 1A and the roads surrounding the Massachusetts Correctional Institution. So once the prioritization plan is approved, the town can move on to the Tier 3 phase where they can apply for construction funding for projects that are in the prioritization plan. And to give you an idea of the projects that can come out of this program, we worked for the town of Lancaster, and we worked on their prioritization plan. It was approved, and then they moved on to the Tier 3 funding. And the set of projects that they submitted for Tier 3 funding included sidewalk reconstruction, some crosswalks, bringing their curb ramps into ADA compliance, and a few bicycle racks at various destination points. You can jump. Oh, thank you. So this is a portion of the area that was constructed, or that was a part of the project limit of the set of projects that they applied for. And the area before the construction included incomplete sidewalks and crosswalks and curb ramps that weren't in compliance. And then after the construction, the town was able to have newly paved sidewalks and compliant crosswalks with ADA compliant curb ramps, as well as a speed radar sign that informs drivers the speeds that they're going. And so the next steps after tonight, we're still going to continue gathering community input through our Wiki Map. So if you forgot about a project that you really want to see in the prioritization plan, you can include that in the Wiki Map. It'll be up for another month. And after we close the Wiki Map, that's when we'll start drafting the project list, and we'll be working with Richard on that to make sure it's feasible and it reflects what the town needs and the town wants. And once that's completed, we're going to submit that to Mass DOT by April 2019 for approval. So that concludes the presentation. Do you guys have any questions before we break out into the small groups?
I do have a question. So you prioritize, we come up with ideas, the town folks come up with ideas and set a priority list. But before you can get the funding for the construction, you have to provide the design. And where does the funding for the design for, say, we wanted to improve the sidewalks on Main Street? So we have to pay for a design, the town. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Yeah, but also the town may have sidewalk construction projects already in mind that have been designed that they can include as a first-year project, and that would be good to do because then they can just get that constructed right away. And for projects that require design, yes, the design portion has to come from a different source, but at least while the first set of projects are being constructed, they can also start designing some of the projects that they anticipate on applying for the next couple of years before they submit for funding again.
Casey,
that makes any sense.
Can I add to that? Chapter 90 money can be used for design. So a lot of towns do use the Chapter 90 for that because do you know Chapter 90?
No.
Oh, sorry. Chapter 90 is a grant program from the state. This is not exact, but it's a grant program from the state that towns receive based on their population, road mileage, and number of jobs. And I don't know exactly what the town of Norfolk receives, but usually it's comparable to what's offered through this grant. And it can be used for repaving, design of roadway projects, and things like that. So usually that's what a lot of the towns have been using for their design, and then they substitute the streets funding in place of other Chapter 90 funds.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Yep.
So you don't have to go to town meeting again for more money.
Right. Right. You don't have to. Chapter 90 can fill in for that. Some towns have chosen to go, but that usually is a little more of a process.
Do you want to add to that, Richard?
Sure. We do have, the planning board has, as projects come in, they all have situations where they're looking to have sidewalks done, but they don't necessarily, they put the money into a sidewalk fund. So there is money that the planning board does have from projects, and we have a spreadsheet for different locations that I think could be another source of money for us if we need to do some design work, which we could take that money and in turn turn it into more sidewalk projects that we could do in that particular instance. I think some of the improvements, it's not heavy design necessarily, so You saw
Like crosswalks.
Right, crosswalks is one of them. The speed, awareness sign that you want, that's something that can be done. So there are different level projects that don't require heavy design to be done. But I think one of the things is participate in this program and having this available to us. I think we'll probably look at development a little bit differently as projects come in, that perhaps, they support some design work. In turn, we can fund, additional improvements through it. We don't have a lot of Chapter 90 money. So it's, that's a little bit trickier source of money, because we usually, the DPW has to be really very diligent about the money they spend on that. But like I said, we do have the money from the sidewalks, and I see this as, once you're in the program, there'll be opportunities to get more money to do that, I think, through development projects.
This was really interesting presentation, and from a pedestrian standpoint, had a lot of insight to it. I know myself and a lot of other residents along the 115, who live near the 115 corridor. Another area of real concern is the traffic speeds and
Right.
that part. What have you found in your other projects to be kind of the most effective approaches for those concerns, like traffic speeds and traffic flows?
So for Route 115, the speed limit varies, right, between 25 to 35. So for portions that are in the 25 speed limit zone, I feel speed humps can do a tremendous job in slowing down vehicles. It's a little difficult for Route 115 because it's a straight corridor in certain areas, so that also warrants a lot of high vehicle speeds because they can. But
Related
speed
to
bumps
that
and
being
speed
kind of
humps do help.
The streets that feed into like major areas like 115. So some of the residential roads like Union or Everett, et cetera. But what about those in terms of, so speed humps are the main thing that you...
There are various complete streets improvements that we could consider. I need to look through exactly, the roadway, the intersection configurations to be able to answer that in a more accurate, concept.
Yeah, and just to build on what you're saying, Casey, I think that it really depends on the situation in the area you're talking about. But even things like the speed feedback signs are helpful, and they're a pretty easy thing to kind of put in just to start. I think people do react to those, and maybe not everybody, but enough people react that you'll kind of slow general traffic down. And then speed humps and other physical design aspects really kind of are spot specific, depending on if it's at an intersection. A lot of the things that you do to make a crossing safer for a pedestrian would also narrow the road, or maybe make it feel a little safe, make it feel safer for pedestrians and tend to slow traffic. So there's a lot of opportunities to look into that.
One example of improvements that we've included in other prioritization plans with intersections that were unsafe because of high vehicular speeds was making sure that the curb radii was fixed so that residents couldn't speed as they turned. So it was like exactly a 90-degree design.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Let's see. Can projects include something that would try to deal with sort of like the basic shape of an intersection? Like I'm thinking of North Needham Pond, that intersection where the visibility is really bad coming out of Needham Street, but it seems to be because of the way it's designed. Can a project address that?
Yeah. So as I said before, we did include several projects in past prioritization plans that tie in curbed radii so that vehicles didn't have the opportunity to speed as they turned. There's also what we've seen in town center are the roundabouts or traffic circles that could also be funded through this program if it's something that the town sees appropriate for that kind of intersection.
I mean, some cases, the other way that on a lower cost basis to kind of direct traffic is just start to line the road with pave markings. So you
Yeah.
when you have a large paved intersection and it's wide open, people, they start to, they'll stripe the lanes to try and channelize it and reduce the area, which can help because now the vehicles have a better sense of where they can be and not be, and then start to do with that. The one that you're talking about, that's a lot more challenging intersection to work on, but I think it's a good intersection to see if we can do some interim things to make improvements there because, and you had that up there, you had that intersection there. But I know I've seen towns, they'll stripe it and narrow it down. Because unfortunately, the good news is about this now is that engineers have, I'll call it seen the light. And this is my anecdotal, I have to say this is very important to me in this regard, is that they would design roads that were wide open and it was volume, move vehicles quickly and so forth. Or I shouldn't say but, put up a sign, okay, well, enforce 30 miles an hour, for example. Well, the reality is, and at a time cars have changed and your sense of speed has gone away. You really need to be mindful of the speed you are. Today, the first car I had at high school, I know how fast I was going because I felt it. So that driver interaction has really kind of changed when you're in vehicles today. But now, there's kind of a combination of things. We're shrinking roads, we're making more things aware for drivers because we need to kind of integrate all that stuff together. So I'm really much happier that, we've kind of come to this point now. And the other thing is pedestrians there's a willingness. I mean, I can remember Mass Highway wouldn't even think about sidewalks before when you try to do something. Now they look at it. So, and speaking of them, somebody's saying the complete streets ideas can be applied to Route 1A too if there's projects that come forward. So I don't, why they can't go through this program.
Yeah.
For example, if we had if there was down the road something's going and we wanted to do something Route 1A, Mass Highway uses that criteria too with road design too. So even though this doesn't apply, they still have to think of those principles when they do roadway jobs today. So I just want to let people know.
Just a question in regards to if and when these projects get chosen and are completed. As far as maintenance goes, is the town then responsible for cost of maintenance, or is this something that we would reapply for yearly for, maintaining those projects?
Yeah, the maintenance would be on the town's end. It's purely a construction funding program. So it does provide the initial phase of, having complete streets network, but to maintain it would land on the town's hands.
Would you have like a breakdown, or would you be able to give examples of the typical costs that a town would see for, say, the handicap ramps that are implemented that then get chipped by a plow over the winter and the
Great
town
question.
has to replace it? Like, what would those types of costs be for the town? Because ultimately it comes back to us, even though they're great projects.
Yeah, it's a good question. Would you be able to answer that,
I don't
Paul?
have the specific takeoffs on that, but I think more what we're, kind of tonight is actually to kind of identify what kind of issues you're facing. And if that becomes a concern, it can also factor into which projects we actually apply to MassDOT for. So I imagine the town does have certain maintenance forces that they use for certain things. And so I think if that is a major concern, like ongoing upkeep, maybe we can target a specific set of projects that are located near downtown where you already have a plan or some way of clearing snow and repairing things or something like that. Like the presentation said, right now we're just trying to cast the net really wide and find out what the whole, in planning circles we call it the universe of projects. Like, let's just tell us everything that's out there, and then we'll start to work with the town collaboratively to say, here's how you can start to solve those things, and here's the ones that actually make sense. They're, a good bang for the buck from the state's capital program, and they're not going to be a major burden on the town because we can work out, some way to take care of them. So that'll definitely factor. So I would say it more factors into the project selection than it does than to actually have like a specific answer for you right now, if that's okay. Yeah.
You want a little group discussion now, or do you want to?
Yeah, if everyone is good with questions, we can move on to the group session.
Oh, sorry, one more question. When you have the draft project, did the residents have a chance just to see what you've drafted as far as the final project, or is that up to,
So
it's up to you, Rich? Or?
yeah, so the process has usually been between us and the town, and usually the town would have a great idea of what is required and what would be needed, in the community. So we don't usually go through a public process once the draft project list has been created or in the process of being created. But that's something that
So I guess the question
Richard and
would
I
be-
can decide on.
Yeah, so when we come up with the draft, if we made it available for public comment and report it back, I mean, don't say we can't do that, right?
Oh, I do a report back?
Yeah, so you're gonna give us a draft at some point. Is that when we get the draft, we make it available for public comment?
Yeah, I mean,
Is that?
we can do that, but the timeline is tight because we have to submit the prioritization plan in April. We close the Wiki Map in first week of January. We start drafting the list. Takes about a month and a half to go back and forth between the town and us to be able to get a pretty final draft project list. And so we can definitely do a public comment phase for that list of projects, but we should also be mindful of the timeline that we are under. So it would probably be a week's worth of, feedback from you guys if that's something that we need to do.
I think one of the things is that the map, when I looked at it the other day, there's tons of ideas, tons of complaints, tons of projects. And, people may wonder, hey, what happened to my particular idea if it's not on the list? Or, hey, did you guys think about something else? Maybe somebody didn't think of something on the map per se.
So I think what we're gonna do from tonight is that I'll get, because I think there's a couple things on here that I didn't have in the other presentation you sent. Oh, your contact? Your contact, the one you emailed me, did it have your contact information on it?
It
The other
did.
one? Did?
Yeah.
So anyway, what we're gonna do is I'll put this on the website. That's where I'm going. I'll take the PowerPoint and I'll get it to IT to put it up on the town website so people can go through this. I know it's gonna be on public cable, and then we'll, I lost my train of thought. Let's say put it up in there. And then, of course, the other thing that you did mention, so we do have to develop a complete street policy. So that's something I'll be working with the Board of Selectmen on and the Planning Board. So that'll be coming up probably towards, probably January. I may try to get something out in December and then kind of come to the board in January and February. But I think if we can, let's try to figure out something. I think it's worthwhile to get the, because I think it would be helpful to the town too, to get those priorities list when it's done.
I guess just sort of speaking to that point as well, are there any projects that you or the town specifically have in mind that will be made clear that these are the town's designations
I don't know if
compared to its citizens?
Bob hasn't given you his little list of things, our DPW director, I don't think.
Not yet.
All right, so I gotta do actually, you know what? Maybe we can kind of create a hybrid situation. Maybe what we'll do is we'll have a we'll go to the Board of Selectmen one night and they can kind of talk about, in the meantime, we'll get it to you, his list, and maybe just talk generally about that list of projects.
Because I just think there's value in everybody here and people that are participating online to sort of understand maybe that the town has certain priorities that they have in mind as well, that maybe the residents either share or could improve upon. So
I think that's a good point. We can definitely do that. So I know not next week, there's another selectmen's meeting before Christmas, or, no, I don't think so. I think it's after Christmas.
Might be after Christmas between.
Yeah, between. So I think I'll talk to Bob about targeting the one after Christmas to do that. It's a little, any other question, right?
What is the width that the town owns? And does it vary throughout the town?
It does vary.
Because you could
yeah.
have a narrow street and a resident says, I don't want my property taken for a sidewalk.
Yeah.
Some of us didn't have a choice too.
Yeah, so it depends. Some can be 50 feet, some are 60 feet, it could be 30 feet on the older roads, you know, they're like 3 rods, it's usually a little bit over 30 feet, I think it is. So, and that's kind of the, you know, some of the limitations of doing some of these.
Is there a way we can find out individually what the center line footage that the town,
Yeah.
like say on
Yeah.
Valley Street?
Yeah, we probably have, I don't know off the
I
top of
think
my head,
I'll
but I
check
think I
into
have.
that, yeah.
I could tell you what Valley Street is.
To add
can?
on to that, Mass DOT does have an interactive map online called the Road Inventory, Mass DOT Road Inventory data, and you can access that and navigate to Norfolk and look for the corridor that you want to get the information of, and it has the surface width and the right-of-way width that you're probably interested in finding out. It has information on speed limits and the ADT taken from 2016.
What was the name of that again?
The Mass DOT Road Inventory interactive map.
Is the concept of eminent domain floating around as projects take place?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't think that.
At what would be the venue for discussing that? Would that be strictly planning board, selectmen?
No, but it would be at the selectmen. Oh, well, it depends how it came about, I suppose. So
And
if it was if it kind of came out of the planning, but like maybe sort of example, there was a planning board project before them, and there was some consideration to eminent domain to make improvements, then that would come there and then go to the selectmen.
but out of this complete street?
And this complete streets, I mean, it could work. Well, so for example, I suppose if we decided that, you know, we wanted to put a sidewalk somewhere that, on a street that's not there right now, we'd look at the right of way and see. Because the thing we try to do, DPW is really good at this, is take advantage of, they like to meander sidewalks, which is nice too. So,
Yeah.
you know, it might take, and would, you know, I know there's for example, there's a project going on Medway Street, a subdivision there, and they're gonna be putting sidewalks on Medway Street, and the developer, well, on all the subdivision, they reserved the area for a sidewalk. The developer approached the abutter, and they granted him an easement to meander the sidewalk behind the trees. So those are the kind of things we need to consider.
Does that also help with the scenic bylaw?
It does, yeah. They kind of work together, you know, so you don't have to have.
You don't have to.
And it helps this because, like
Yeah.
Casey mentioned, it creates a, I mean, you saw the sidewalk on 115 that Bob did the newer section, the
Yeah,
TPW.
sure.
They like to have the grass strip to separate it from the roadway, and that's kind of on that same idea as, you know, meandering.
Okay, that's an
sidewalk.
area of great interest to me, is the scenic roads, the eminent
Right.
domain, the
Right.
getting it done without
So that's a little,
hurting.
that makes it a little bit trickier for us. It's not a bad thing, is that we have to work within those.
Yeah,
So,
that's a priority to me.
Yeah, so that, no, I know.
More
that's-
about it.
Yeah, so I mean, the idea of where we could do it, you know, essentially create an easement or extend the right of way to go around a stone wall or trees, that's the,
Okay.
we would definitely look at that.
Okay.
'cause-
Yeah,
That-
so to
that's
add
good
on
to
to
know.
that, an important thing to note is that, you know, this is a funding source, but it's not that much money. And, you know, when you consider the larger scale projects, you know, you can only get $400,000 per submission. So, I mean, going in, if you start into the conversations of taking right-of-ways, that gets pretty expensive in addition to this sidewalk construction. And so I think keeping in mind of prioritizing roads that already have the adequate width to already provide the sidewalks as opposed to having to take right-of-ways is good to focus on through for this program because of its limited funding.
Yeah, we're dreaming big, but then we gotta check a reality and we have the cost, and, yeah. But there's a way to,
But as
there's a way
long as
to
it's
accommodate it.
on the list of things.
In the universe of the idea of it,
Yes.
we would want to take in the stone walls and the scenic roads, and the idea is
And-
we want to have a sidewalk,
Yeah.
but at the same time, we want to maintain the character too, so we gotta, you know, so, yeah, we're a little more challenging for us, but not doable.
I guess along those lines as well, knowing that there's a lot of development that's happening in town, and a lot of the developers that are coming in, I believe they have certain requirements to provide funding, as you said, for sidewalk. And some of these developments are even talking about tying into existing sidewalks that aren't necessarily attached to the developments that are being built. So I guess with that said, obviously the funding that we would be receiving wouldn't be enough to really make great headway with regard to that. But are there certain, like I know, say Village Green and the Enclave, for example, there have been talks of tying in from the development all the way out to Cleveland Street. Are there other developments that you know of that are thinking of doing that, so that we're aware of it?
Well, I think the one top of my list is, or the top right now, so Cranberry Heights is over off of Lawrence Street, and they're connecting two subdivisions together, and we're gonna need sidewalks. So the Causeway, the Lawrence, and the Bridge project will have the sidewalk as part of that project, and then you have the development up at Cranberry Heights, which the planning board in this case would want to have sidewalks off-site, so they'll either, put money into the off-site mitigation sidewalk, or maybe there's a way to get it done as part of the project, and then, of course, Park Street doesn't have the sidewalks on it, but at least you could then add the other piece from the bridge up to, no, we actually do have sidewalks. So with the Lawrence Street project, there'll be sidewalk from Park Street all the way through to the other side of Bush Pond.
Okay.
So then there's a way to get sidewalks from Cranberry Heights. That's one right now.
Yeah, I'm thinking as far as tying in communities and completing our streets. If you have the opportunity to do some funded by the town and some funded by this project, it's kind of.
So the project you
coming full
mentioned, the
circle.
Enclave?
Yep.
Right now, the ZBA is considering, they want to have the sidewalks out to Cleveland Street, but then also to have paths through that development out to Rockwood Road on, I think what the number is, but. to
Yeah,
be
so
able-
it would come in between like where the
And
Aqua
then
Barrier
come out
projects.
to the, in the street, but they will then be able to get to the
Board
to the,
Juniper?
to, here, the board.
Yep.
Yeah, what's that little side street?
Juniper.
Huh?
There's Juniper.
Yeah,
Juniper's
Juniper,
like
right, so they have a
over
path
there.
to come out to, so do both those two. So that would,
But that would be something that would be.
but that'd be done at the
sponsored.
developer,
Right.
right? So it's not to say, like, yes, when we do this prioritization plan, that this could be, say, the town can use as a menu, instead of, maybe we change things perhaps, instead of getting mitigation money for sidewalk,
Right.
we've got a project and it's in the area, you just say, go do it, so.
One of my questions is, as far as the probably bigger challenges you guys are going to see in this town, obviously, is the narrow roads that kind of meander all over the place. It seems to be the biggest challenge as far as providing access for pedestrians and bikes without taking land by right, eminent domain. Do you have any other recommendations as far as ways to improve access for bikes and pedestrians that might be a little more of a direct path that rather than
That are narrow.
for narrow rights of way, basically, to reduce traffic speeds and.
I mean, through this program, I think the most simple improvement would be signage, because it's very difficult to get into a comprehensive, large-scale project.
Right.
So what we've done for other towns that are too narrow to incorporate any infrastructure improvements, signage, to make cyclists aware that the road should be shared with each other, with vehicles and cyclists. Yeah. I mean, do you have any?
Well, I think the narrow roads with high speeds are really tough to work with.
Right.
And so I would think that maybe what we could do, it sounds like there might be some interest in maybe like talking a little bit like a toolkit, because we can't identify every issue here on all of those streets, because it seems like there's a lot. But one of the other things maybe we could talk about is maybe identifying like parallel routes that maybe don't go through, and if there's some opportunity to create a path that would be more biker pedestrian friendly,
Sure.
That might be an option. I don't know how, I think there might be limited options for that, but that's one thing you could do, is not trying to just kind of almost like leave that road for the high-speed traffic and find another place for bikes and peds to go.
A lot of the high-speed traffic that I think you're referring to, they're residential roads. I mean, we have families living on these roads, and you've got people taking them because Google routes them through those roads instead of 1A, instead of whatever, Route 1. And, people just fly through. And so whether you're a pedestrian, a bicyclist, or you're with your family in the front yard, picking something up and, you're worried about the speed. I think that, that's the biggest concern for the smaller residential roads. People keep talking about everyone's flying by. I nearly die every time I go get my, mail.
It's enforcement though.
The two things I've seen personally, like I grew up in California and think, population exploded out there during the time that I lived there. It was speed humps and basically feedback signs.
Yeah.
Those were the two things that they employed the most, and it seemed to help the most.
Oh, that's good.
Your speed is 55 and you're in a 30-mile-an-hour zone, and here comes a speed hump, and you'll destroy your axle if you go faster than 30. So, and it's your fault. So.
Yeah, those are effective. I think each town kind of has to come to their comfort level with that as far as clearing and having them, because on the way here I went over a bunch, and I couldn't keep track of which town it was in, but I came in through 109 and all that, and so they are around, and we could look into that for sure.
Just a comment on that. In California, did you have snow? I mean, did you have plows that were going to be?
That's
going over
not the only
speed
place
bumps?
they have speed humps.
Yeah. Just wonder how that works. Because I know in our neighborhood we have speed humps, but then they take them out in the wintertime.
They can design speed humps to be more friendly to plows. I can't say that every plow driver would love them, but instead of the more standard shopping plaza speed bumps, they'd be a little bit rounder so that the blade can go up and over. They can do that. I don't know if it's it's not a fully proven science. Yeah.
Aren't those the ones you have there now, Peter?
The residents on Everett Street needed traffic to slow down, so what they ended up was calling it a speed lump.
Speed hump. Speed hump,
They warn you, and the plow can deal with it, and there was feedback from driving the ambulance, and so they seem to have worked it out.
Good. So there is one on Everett
There's
Street?
lumps around.
There's more than one.
Just like four.
About 4 of them.
Okay.
They go.
So we can move.
I just have a kind of a technical question. North Street from the Rotary in the center of town, the sidewalks were repaved or redone about halfway down. Is there a plan already in place to finish redoing the sidewalks on North Street?
It got bumped.
There is, I believe there is actually a plan. I think it's a matter of the funding of that plan,
Oh,
unless you know Kevin better than I.
I know that there was a very comprehensive plan in place
Yeah.
for sidewalk development and the completion of the connections that fell to the wayside a few years ago. You probably know more about that than I do, but
Yeah, I know I know it's high on the DPW's.
it is.
To basically what you saw, that new section, it did kind of mirror that going down.
Yeah.
Which makes it kind of tough because, not tough, but again, it's stone walls to kind of cut back the slopes and, be mindful of the trees, but there is, I think once you get some more money, it wants to continue to, with that project.
Yes, we do.